Johnny Carson exposed the 9 visitors from the Golden Age who were truly malevolent. For 30 years, Johnny Carson delivered, bringing the top stars in America into people's living rooms nationwide. His pleasant chuckle and kind grin gave spectators the impression that they were enjoying coffee and catching up with old friends. However, as the audience left and the camera stopped recording, Carson's smile frequently vanished at home. Those closest to him claimed that America's favorite host maintained a list of visitors he deemed to be very awful people. On camera, Johnny was the epitome of professionalism, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who spent more than 10 years collaborating with Carson. However, the instant we switched to, he would occasionally turn to Ed in the ad and mutter, "That person should never be near a camera or a child." In his last years, Carson opened out more about the superstars he had secretly hated during the course of his career. According to the tales he shared with close associates, cherished figures who were monsters hiding beneath their meticulously manicured public personas. The most startling were Carson's disclosures regarding one renowned backstage. An actress who seemed nice and fragile on his couch, verbally abused a young security, had to step in because the production assistant was acting so violently. Additionally, Carson nabbed the well-liked male celebrity. The presenter almost phoned the cops because he was doing something so unsettling in his dressing area. These weren't merely demanding celebrities or challenging personalities. Carson claimed that these were truly sinister individuals concealed by their notoriety and aptitude. For many years, the industry shielded predators, abusers, and manipulators. However, first we must comprehend why Carson disliked the first name on his list the most, and why the backstage area was secret. Conflict that has never before been made public. First of all, I believe they are all aware that I am stage-struck. Second, I look for a movie that has a distinct audience. Joan Crawford, the Queen of Hollywood, with her veins were frozen. In 1970, when Joan Crawford made an appearance on The Tonight Show, audiences witnessed the polite Hollywood tale they had long adored. With her flawless looks, trained charisma, and ideal stance, Crawford was the epitome of classic Hollywood glitz. However, several Tonight Show employees claim that Crawford's off-camera behavior showed a very different individual. "She was one of the coldest people I've ever interviewed." Carson years later, he reportedly told his biographer, "Like conversing with a lovely statue that is empty." Crawford's, before she even got to the studio, her appearance started to cause issues. Among her requests was certain lighting. Specifications so specific that the technical director of the program kept the 4-page note in his files for decades. Later, according to a former producer, everything had to be exact. The height of Johnny's desk, the tilt of her chair, even the studio's temperature, which is precisely 67 degrees rather than 66 degrees or 68 degrees. When 3 hours prior to recording, Crawford finally showed up, bringing her own makeup crew. Even if the program has one makeup artist on staff, but it was Crawford's treatment of individuals differently based on their significance. An onstage stagehand remarked, "She practically curtsied to Johnny that day." However, when a Crawford blew up when a teenage production assistant brought water into her dressing room by mistake. Several witnesses claim that Crawford went on a rant so savage that employees in the corridor froze in disbelief. Allegedly, she contacted the assistant, a 20-year-old woman who was new to the field, a stupid little __, and advised her to look for employment in a brothel where her lack of intelligence may be a strength. The Crawford requested that the young woman be dismissed after she fled in tears. Tension arose because Carson's producer refused during the recording. However, Crawford's appearance was particularly unsettling not only because of the way she treated employees. It was the methodical way she changed things as soon as the camera started. She was acting like a machine. One producer remembers that she was a woman. She had practiced every response, every giggle, every unplanned moment. There was nothing actual. Crawford would instantly stop smiling during commercial breaks and sit in stony silence, not talking to anyone, and when the red light returned, they promptly came back to life. Carson, who is renowned for his ability to entertain, found it difficult to establish a genuine relationship with Crawford, despite feeling at ease. Following the performance, he allegedly informed Ed when Christina Crawford's memoir was published years later. McMahon said, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Joan was accused of abusing her adopted children, as detailed in Dearest. It did not surprise Carson. As per intimate pals, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." He merely nodded. However, if Crawford's Carson was unsettled by cold calculation, and he found something even more unsettling in his next adversary. Unadulterated strength used to threaten and intimidate. "I can respond to it by saying that I play during such beautiful times." Carson couldn't stand the charming bully Frank Sinatra or Daphne and Chloe. In the movie, Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson seemed to be on good terms, even friendly. The renowned vocalist would quip, share Carson portrayed the dignified host, while the others told stories and occasionally performed. But behind the scenes, Carson was said to have a strong distaste for Sinatra. Not because of his skill, which Carson admired, but because of how elderly blue when he believed no one significant was looking. Eyes treated individuals. Carson he would be a mob enforcer if he didn't sing. According to several biographies, he once told a friend, "I believe he was both at times the appearances of Sinatra were infamous among the cast of The Tonight Show for causing conflict." As stated by lifelong employees, up to 8 men who were characterized as more guys than show industry types would accompany Sinatra when he arrived. In an alley you wouldn't want to meet. These individuals would circulate the studio, observing the employees and fostering an environment that one cameraman characterized as like being watched. However, what really unsettled Carson was seeing how Sinatra handled those he thought below him. When Sinatra performed in the early 1970s, a floor manager erred by giving him the usual 3-minute notice prior to his segment. Several witnesses said that Sinatra seized the man by the tie and "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a senior after the Korean War, a 50-year-old veteran, was clearly affected. Carson noticed this exchange from his workplace monitor. He came close to ending the segment. Only the producer's reminder of Sinatra's potential ratings persuaded him to go on. The dependability or lack thereof of Sinatra was another point of contention. He claimed to have repeatedly postponed appearances, once as little as 2 hours prior to filming, when he was decided he wasn't in the mood, even though he was already in the building. During a commercial break, the most shocking incident occurred, when Sinatra, loud enough for those around him, made a derogatory remark regarding the appearance of a female employee to listen. Carson retorted icily, breaking his customary professional distance, "We don't talk about my staff." Sinatra was clearly shocked that anyone, even Johnny Carson, would act in that manner here, and the tension was evident. Take him on. Both guys kept up their professional demeanors as the cameras re-entered, but crew members observed that Carson's inquiries grew noticeably less involved and shorter. Following that performance, Carson allegedly stated this is especially noteworthy because his producer said, "I don't care what his ratings are. Limit him to once a year maximum." Importantly, Carson almost never explicitly prohibited guests, and hardly ever participated in booking choices. His decision to limit Sinatra's appearances revealed how much he disliked the singer's actions. Carson's next problematic visitor, Sinatra, embodied the bullying aspect of celebrity power, showed a distinct kind of difficulty, the overbearing ego that had no regard for limits or conventions. Now the globe is filled, which is an argument against what I'm saying. Everybody. The most talented young filmmakers are wet. The genius who believed that rules were beneath him was Orson Welles. Orson during the Carson era, he made several appearances on The Tonight Show, consistently producing memorable television with his loud voice, imposing appearance, and amazing tales from his illustrious career. At home, viewers observed a smart, engaging racer. Something else caught Carson's and his team's attention. A man whose pride had become so great that he felt he was exempt from the standard television standards. According to reports, Carson replied, "Never again." Following one Welles appearance was very challenging. "That guy thinks he's still controlling Rome." Usually the issues started. Welles frequently rejected any prepared material before he even reached the studio, according to Tonight Show writers. "He told us our questions were pedestrian and obvious," one former employee said of the queries or subjects Carson's team had developed. The author remembered. "He returned an empty page, physically crossing them all out." Carson was placed in the awkward situation of having to do an unprepared and unstructured interview with one of the most important figures in cinema. A specific difficulty considering Welles' propensity to start long, rambling pieces that were challenging to edit in a timely manner. In the course of one Welles appearance, which lasted 7 minutes, took place in the middle of the 1970s. He spent about 25 hours on the couch. Minutes disregarding several subliminal indications from Carson that it was time to conclude. Johnny would use a set of cues to give visitors when there was a shortage of time, a director clarified. Welles spotted them all and continued to speak. "We had to bump into each other. 2 additional visitors in total." Welles was similarly contemptuous of the employees. According to reports, he declined to even when they were standing, spoke directly to production helpers rather than using the third person. Next to him, asked the boy to change the light, or tell the girl that I need more water. What annoyed me the most, Carson, was Welles's tendency to treat The Tonight Show as though it were his own, according to people who knew him well. Own platform as opposed to Carson's initiative. Orson would bring props, abruptly shift the subject, and even try to control camera angles while seated. According to a former producer, he once really got up and attempted to inform our camera operators what angles to utilize. Johnny was furious. Following one especially difficult appearance, genius doesn't excuse everything. According to reports, Carson told Ed McMahon that being smart doesn't allow you the authority to take over another person's program. As a television production perfectionist, Carson discovered Wells's especially glaring disrespect for the limitations of the medium. Despite his professed admiration for Wells's enormous contributions to cinema, he secretly started to see him as a warning about what happens when skill is overlooked by ego. Wells symbolized the difficulty of controlling an excessive personality, but Carson's next challenging the visitor presented another issue. Unpredictable conduct that could easily escalate into hostility is expressed in light bulbs. I mean, aside from a trait known as temperament, which is primarily found in Bette Davis, the linguistic queen of Hollywood, aggression. Viewers witnessed the iconic actress at her most captivating when she made an appearance on The Tonight Show. Delivering humorous tales in her own style, graceful even in her advanced age and brimming with intriguing Hollywood past. The moments prior to and following the red light turning on, when Davis allegedly disclosed a character, be so harsh that even Carson, who couldn't be beaten, was surprised. She requires a stage, not a stage, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon courtroom following a particularly challenging appearance. No one ought to be forced to be Bette Davis cross-examined him without a lawyer present. Several Tonight Show employees claim that this was Davis's first transgression. Accounts was how she interacted with other visitors. When Davis was scheduled to appear on shows alongside several superstars, he would frequently talk over or interrupt them, particularly if they were women or younger performers. She would manually rotate her back on the couch with other visitors. If someone else was telling a story that recalled a former talent coordinator, garnered laughs, you could see her fuming and making plans to get back in charge. Davis' actions behind the scenes were even more troublesome. Before appearances, she allegedly insisted on having whiskey in her dressing room. Not out of the ordinary for visitors of her time, but her drinking occasionally resulted in improper remarks and actions. Female employees who worked on the program in the 1970s claim that Davis frequently used racist and sexist language that was shocking even by that era's standards. One cosmetics artist remembered that Davis had turned her down services, requesting instead a person whose hands do not shake as if they have just been out of 3 days of alcohol. Carson Davis, who usually shied away from conflict, made an exception when she started reprimanding a cue card holder for being during a rehearsal it was too slow. In fact, Johnny intervened, recalling a manufacturing worker who saw the incident. "Miss Davis, on this show we speak to everyone with respect or we don't speak," he said to her in a very hushed voice. At all. She was taken aback, maybe because she wasn't used to being pushed back. What made Davis especially the disparity between Carson's indisputable brilliance and how she treated other people was challenging for her. In contrast to some, Davis, a true icon whose work Carson appreciated, was a challenging visitor who could be written off as untalented. Following, according to reports, Carson told his producer after her last appearance on the show in the early 1980s, "That's the last time. Life's, no matter how many Oscars she wins, it's too short to spend it being verbally abused by Bette Davis." While Davis, at Carson's next problematic guest, who at least aimed her jabs at grown-ups, who could defend themselves, brought a different actions that went beyond professional bounds and caused discomfort to young women. A few too. "Yes, of course. I will make you tall and strong." The elderly kid star with straying hands is Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was the top box office star and a member of Hollywood royalty. Office star between 1939 and 1941 and a living link to the sector's heyday. His Tonight Show appearances ought to have been sentimental remembrances of a remarkable career. Rather, numerous staff reports claim that Rooney's visits were infamous for his improper conduct, erratic energy, and sporadic drunkenness. He believes that being short gives him permission to act in a perverse manner. Carson reportedly told his producer after one particularly problematic appearance in the mid-1970s. Rooney, then in his mid-50s, he gained a reputation among female employees for inappropriate, provocative and remarks, as well as disregarding professional limits. Numerous reports state that youthful production assistants, when they found out Rooney was booked, they would request to be reassigned. When you offered him water, he would grab your hand, try to draw you in, and inquire as to whether you were married, remembered a former show assistant from the late 1970s. Should you attempt to depart, he would retain your a bit too long on the wrist. Rooney's obvious incapacity to identify when he'd had to was even more worrisome. A lot of alcohol. Employees of The Tonight Show said that he was obviously drunk for at least 3 odd looks, slurred speech, and lost his train of thought in the middle of a phrase. In the course of one notorious Rooney started narrating a Judy Garland story in a 1977 piece that swiftly became unsuitable, so Carson had to interrupt him and change the subject. In the commercial pause, "Is he drunk, or is this just who he is now?" Carson allegedly asked his producer. What made Rooney especially Carson found it challenging that different generations had different ideas about what was proper behavior. Born Rooney came from a time in Hollywood in 1920 when specific behaviors regarding women were normal, if not approved. According to a director who worked on the project, Johnny was not a prude, but he had definite boundaries about professional conduct. Exhibit for a long time. When criticized for his actions, Rooney appeared truly perplexed, as if he didn't comprehend why there was an issue. Following one episode in which Rooney repeatedly disparaged a young actress who was there on the show that evening, Carson took the uncommon step of personally apologizing to her following the recording. "Never have I witnessed Johnny so ashamed by," the director recalled. Guest behavior. "That's not how professionals act on my show," he informed her. "And it won't happen again." As promised, Rooney had fewer appearances in the late 1970s and in the 1980s, Carson allegedly insisted on pre-tapings during the day instead of live nighttime broadcasts when Rooney was reserved. Although Rooney's actions led to awkward circumstances, Carson's subsequent difficult visitor brought a different sort of challenge. They made such outrageous and far-reaching demands that they became famous among the employees. "Indeed, I don't believe the last marriage ended quickly, and I didn't anticipate it lasting that long." The diva who drove Carson was Zaza Gabor to give up. Zaza Gabor's glitzy look, unique accent, and flirty demeanor made her a favorite on The Tonight Show, who made numerous appearances when Carson was host. The audience witnessed an endearing, extravagant celebrity who made fun of her numerous marriages and Hungarian heritage. Behind the scenes, as stated by according to many crew reports, Gabor was one of the most challenging and demanding guests in the history of the show. "I would prefer, after a particularly taxing Gabor appearance," Carson reportedly said, "interview a cat. At least the cat wouldn't require special lighting and 3 assistants." Gabor's demands started long before she got to the former Tonight Show staff members said that one of her routine requests was a particular temperature in her 74 degrees, fresh flowers in the dressing room, only orchids, no carnations, and a bottle of her own lighting technician was flown in at the expense of the production, and there were precisely 3 ice cubes in the Perrier water. No female. In what the writer described as a spoof of celebrity expectations, guests under 40 were scheduled on the same program. "When we initially received it, we felt it was a joke," said a former talent coordinator. When these standards weren't according to reports, Gabor would not leave her dressing room until the issue was resolved, frequently delaying recording and disrupting the schedule for the entire show. One of the most notorious instances was when Gabor showed up for a recording and found that her favorite brand of foundation was not available in the makeup section. According to several witnesses, she yelled at the chief makeup artist and demanded that someone be sent to Beverly Hills right away to buy the right merchandise. In fact, Johnny had to step in. A former producer he contacted her instantly and recalled, saying something like, "Za honey, you already look gorgeous, and we have a show to perform. Let's put off the beauty crisis for another time." What annoyed Carson the most about Gabor's conduct had an impact on the entire crew. People would have to labor, and other guests would be kept waiting. Overtime and the well-organized schedule of the performance would be thrown into disarray. Following one appearance in which Gabor, according to reports, Carson grumbled to his executive about her debut after arriving 40 minutes late. "Producer, tell her we've changed the name of the show to The Tonight Show, with Zaza Gabor, the next time she wants to appear, and I'll be glad to be her sidekick." Gabor persisted on making appearances on the show in spite of these annoyances. Evidence of Carson's unquestionable entertainment value when the cameras were actually rolling during her reign. Logistics were complicated by Gabor's demanding demands, but Carson's next difficult visitor brought something new. Unpredictable conduct that has the potential to swiftly transform a casual interview into an awkward encounter. Cow, the annoying mother. A 2-time Oscar winner, Shelley Winters was known as the unpredictable powder keg, her career spanning decades from character parts in her old years to spectacular roles in her teens. On paper, she should have been the perfect Tonight Show guest, skilled, successful, and plenty of Hollywood anecdotes. In fact, according to Winters, was one of Carson's most erratic guests according to the show's crew. Shell doesn't talk. Following one especially explosive appearance, Carson reportedly stated she detonates, whereas became notorious among staff of the program for her failure or refusal to adjust to the recent light, entertainment-focused approach television at night. Instead of offering humorous anecdotes or advertising ongoing initiatives, she would frequently start severe political diet, tribal, or very private information that made Carson clearly uneasy. In the course of one sometime in the middle of the 1970s, what started out as a straightforward inquiry regarding a recent movie swiftly turned into Winters providing a 5-minute unbroken monologue concerning corruption in government, leaving Carson unable to make a playful switch to a commercial. Johnny was an expert at managing discussions. However, according to a former director, Shelley was like attempting to control a tornado. All he could do once she started was await her to exhaust herself. Winters' erratic behavior extended beyond the subjects of her conversations. She turned into also prone to physical outbursts. She once famously hurled a tumbler of alcohol in a British talk show. Oliver Reed's face following his misogynistic remarks as a fellow guest. The personnel of tonight's performance was known for their volatility, anxious every time she was scheduled. We would actually remove certain items from the set when we knew she was coming, as a stage manager in the past. Anything that could be thrown or knocked over would mysteriously disappear before her segments. Despite these difficulties, Winters stood apart from some of Carson's other challenging visitors due to her conduct. Appeared to be motivated more by true passion than by ego or malice. She had a strong interest in social and political issues, and viewed every public appearance as a chance to speak to them, regardless of the suitability of the setting. Carson, despite her obvious discomfort at her more severe times, she showed some respect for Winters' genuineness. Following one especially vehement presentation in which she denounced the Vietnam War, Carson allegedly told his producer, "I may not want to vacation with her, but at least she means every word she says." However, in the latter years of Carson's employment, Winters' appearances decreased, with the host favoring visitors with conversational styles that enhanced rather than contradicted the format of the show. As Winters' on-air difficulties were caused by passionate unpredictability, Carson's next challenging guest symbolized something he personally I thought it was disgusting. Extreme political opinions directed upon marginalized groups. Red core problems and large muscles appeal to me. The star whose politics Carson couldn't stand, Jane Russell, is attractive and I like her. Russell, Jane, was among the most recognizable sex symbols in Hollywood during the 1940s and 1950s. Well known for movies like Gentlemen and The Outlaw Blondes Are Preferred. She appeared to be an obvious recurring character because of her remarkable beauty and important role in movie history. A Tonight Show guest. However, Russell hardly ever returned to Carson's after making a few appearances in the early 1970s. Couch, a choice that show insiders claim was motivated by Carson's unease with her progressively intense political opinions and the way LGBTQ+ employees are being treated. Although Carson is a moderate Republican personally, kept The Tonight Show largely neutral on contentious issues for the majority of his life. Political matters. However, it has been stated that Russell expressed harsh conservative opinions in backstage discussions that bothered Carson. According to a former employee, Johnny could handle guests having different political opinions, maker. He was troubled when such viewpoints evolved into personal assaults on employees or other visitors. Several reports claim that Russell gained notoriety for his derogatory remarks toward LGBTQ+ people involved in the program. She allegedly forbade a gay makeup artist from appearing at one occasion in the early 1970s. Carson was even more alarmed by a reported event in which an artist touched her face and demanded a replacement. Russell declined to be scheduled on the same program as Rock Hudson, according to a talent coordinator who worked on the production episode as Hudson, making disparaging remarks regarding his sexual orientation which were not made public at the time was well known in Hollywood at the time. Johnny had a large gay friend group which included a number of employees. He was ahead of his time in not tolerating that kind of behavior, the talent coordinator recalled. Bigotry on his show. According to reports, Carson and Russell had their final altercation in 1973, when during a commercial break, she made disparaging remarks on civil rights laws, but it was ignored on broadcast mics. Several crew members heard her comments which apparently made it to Carson's ears. Russell was conspicuously absent from The Tonight Show's guest list for the rest of the show after that appearance. During his tenure, Carson seems to have personally vetoed future bookings in one of the few distinct instances. What stood out about this circumstance was Carson's general hesitancy to completely exclude visitors, especially those with. Given Russell's celebrity status and historical significance in Hollywood, it is remarkable that he took such a strong stand. Demonstrated how much he disapproved of her actions. However, Russell's politics and handling of Carson and the crew developed a lasting rift, and his last and possibly most vehement distaste was saved for a comedian whose private behavior and public image were said to be quite different. This is a question I've never asked you before, but I'm asking it now, plain and simple. One of America's most popular celebrities, comedian Jerry Lewis Carson, described as extremely cruel, a trailblazing comedian, actor, filmmaker, and humanitarian, he is well known for his yearly telethons that support muscular dystrophy study. He became a worldwide celebrity due to his frenzied energy and physical humor. Behind the scenes, according to multiple Tonight Show staff members, Lewis was also one of Hollywood's most challenging and nasty celebrities, a reputation that brought him. Carson allegedly said, "He's what happens when ego outruns talent." He has a special place on his personal blacklist, a co-worker following an especially problematic Lewis appearance in the middle of the 1970s. In contrast to those challenging visitors who, according to reports, Lewis made no secret of his contempt for Carson and reserved their worst behavior for subordinates. Himself. Lewis frequently interrupted Carson during one notorious performance, taking questions meant for other visitors, and once went so far as to uninvitedly fix Carson's tie, a gesture that clearly the generally unflappable host was irritated. Johnny detested being touched without consent. According to a previous producer, it was a well-known rule: you don't touch Johnny unless he initiates it. Lewis was aware of this, yet he persisted as a power move. Lewis allegedly treated crew personnel even worse. Several reports state that he would not wanting to learn the names of employees, calling them "hey you" or by their role: camera guy, makeup girl, irrespective of their seniority or expertise. One especially unsettling instance was when a camera operator allegedly had a slight cough as Lewis was rehearsing. Several witnesses said that Lewis halted everything and went into a rant, accusing the cameraman of being a professional who breathes like a child and making demands. He was taken out of the studio. It was confirmed by a floor manager that Jerry yelled at a camera operator for breathing loudly. Was there breathing, not talking? The poor man was allergic. The thing about Lewis that Carson disliked the most was the discrepancy between his actions against individuals in private and his public persona as an unwavering advocate for children was not going to help his career. According to a producer who worked there, Johnny's flesh crawled during the Jekyll and Hyde performance, close to Carson. After seeing Jerry sob on his telethon about how much he loved kids, he came to our show and as if they were less than human. In the early 1980s, following Lewis's last Tonight Show performance, Carson, according to reports, he instructed his executive producer,
"Never again."
Although Carson rarely explicitly prohibited visitors, Lewis became one of the few famous people who were essentially barred from the show in its last 10 years. Years later, at a private dinner, when questioned about Lewis, Carson allegedly said something that startled everyone in attendance. With its unusual ruthlessness, he stands out as genuinely hostile in a community full of fakers, and it takes some doing. What the real nature of Hollywood is revealed by Carson's blacklist. Johnny Carson's own thoughts on these 9 challenging visitors: Shelley, Betty Davis, Mickey Rooney, Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Joan Crawford, and Zaza Gabor. Jerry Lewis, Jane Russell and Winters provide a unique, unvarnished look at the real Hollywood behind the meticulously kept up a show of charm and glitz. According to an experienced Tonight Show producer, Johnny witnessed everything. For 30, he served as a conduit for all major stars to reach the American people for years. He was aware of who was sincere and who was pretending. Carson's evaluations are especially useful because he had no motive to inflate or create unfavorable narratives. In contrast to tabloid reporters or irate workers with grievances to air, Carson was at the ultimate height of the entertainment sector. Criticizing these superstars didn't benefit him in any way, and everything to lose if his candor harmed his chances of getting guests. Johnny had no intention of making adversaries, his old producer pointed out. On the contrary, he wanted every interview to be successful. When he didn't like, they had made it hard not to, therefore it was someone. Carson's special role as a gatekeeper, and he had a unique viewpoint on celebrity culture because he was a confessor to the stars. For 30 years, celebrities displayed aspects of themselves on his couch that they only displayed there, fostering a relationship of trust that makes Carson's own opinions even more important. Carson's ability to differentiate between guests is arguably the most illuminating. Those he thought were really problematic and those who were just challenging. He put up with oddities, anxiety, even a modest ego. It came with the area of celebrity to comprehend these. Cruelty was something he could not tolerate, particularly in the direction of those who are weaker. Recalling his longtime director, Johnny had a straightforward test. How were the pages handled? The guys operating the cameras, the assistants, that provided him with all the information he required regarding someone's personality. Since his passing in 2005, many of Carson's personal beliefs have been supported by more disclosures regarding these celebs. The accusations made by Christina Crawford against her mother, Joan. Information regarding stories of Mickey Rooney's inappropriate behavior and Sinatra's ties to organized crime have both been confirmed by several sources. This implies Carson wasn't merely passing judgment, he was identifying sincere character defects that the public was kept unaware of by Hollywood's publicity machine. The majority of the depressing thing about Carson's blacklist is how well these superstars were shielded by the studio structure, even though industry insiders being aware of their actions. Before social media and cancel culture, celebrities were able to maintain impeccable public personas while acting reprehensibly in private, safe in the understanding that the studios, networks, and publications all have a stake in keeping their marketability intact. One cell phone today, according to a former Tonight Show writer, a video might ruin a career. In those days, a chair might be thrown at an assistant's, and the story would remain within the building as long as tickets were sold. When we reflect on Hollywood's Carson's candid evaluations of the golden period with nostalgia are a useful reminder that our culture icons have always been complex, imperfect people. Occasionally motivating, occasionally disheartening, and behind their meticulously constructed public personalities, they can occasionally be quite unsettling. The camera doesn't, Johnny used to say, it adds a layer of fiction. Just add 10 pounds, he recalled his longtime producer. His best ability wasn't simply conducting interviews, it was revealing the truth beneath the pretense. Thank you for seeing this examination of Johnny Carson's most challenging visitors. If you thought this exploration of television's golden age was insightful, please like this video. And if you were surprised by these Tonight Show revelations, subscribe for more in-depth explorations of entertainment history. Watch our upcoming video to learn more about the popular comedy from the 1980s, in which the cast members were covertly tortured by the kid star's adorable on-screen persona concealed violent outbursts so intense that emergency buttons were added by the producers on set. To ensure you don't miss the next shocking Hollywood expose, click the bell button.